CPI. So do you see in your books where it's got this chart that has a market basket, numbers, it's got like 10 pens. How do I turn it?
There's a button.
Which button is it?
Yeah. Here, once again. And again. There we go.
Bam. All right. Turn this. Oh my goodness.
You can turn it the other way.
All right. So do you see this chart in your book where it goes like 10 pens, 5 shirts? How many pairs of shoes? Thanks. And then right above this, what does it say? In your book, what does it say? Market basket, doesn't it? Does it say market basket? Now, what the heck is a market basket? Haley, what's a market basket? It's a thing you shop with, right? Especially those little ones they use to indoctrinate children.
I love those. They're so awesome.
It's like mind control, man. It's like training them to be shoppers from the time they are 3. They are right. All right. Are we talking about that kind of market basket, Haley, or not? No. What are we talking about? What's a market basket? According to chapter 5, Blake. Chapter 5. What's a market basket? A combination of items. That's a sample of prices that we can look at out there, right? The reality is we don't have enough people to check every single price in society for consumers, producers, whatever measure you're going to use. So you have to sample them. There are volunteers that work for the government that will go once a month to, selected Ralph's, for instance, and other kinds of establishments. And this is tedious, man. They have these clipboards with huge list of prices, and they write down what the price is each month of an 8-pack of hot dog buns produced by Weber, with all the specifications that they looked at last month. It's got to be the exact same thing. Otherwise, the comparison doesn't transfer over. And if it's up a penny, 5 pennies, 10 pennies, they write that down. If it's down, they write that down. And they track this stuff. And then they report it all to a central database, and they calculate what the CPI is. Okay? So they have to do a sampling. Even though it's pretty well staffed, they still don't look at every possible item. It's obvious you can't go to every possible store in the country. But you might be saying, well, did they track every single price? Not necessarily. Not of every kind of thing that gets sold. So it's a sample. That's what the market basket is. It's a sample of items that average citizens would buy on a regular basis. Okay? So in this example, it's a very simple example. We're going to do pens, shirts, and pairs of shoes. Now, I don't know how you can survive just on that. You can't eat shoes. I don't think. Especially boiled, maybe. All right? So this is an unrealistic example. But the point is still this, that it's a sample, all right? Now, so how do you compute the CPI? It's real simple. If you follow along in your book, yes?
Doesn't the IRS track all that anyway?
The IRS track prices?
Well, not prices, but total, like based on the income tax that you
They, in many cases, they track sales revenue as a function of calculating how much taxable income needs to be reported, but that's not really their focus to track prices per se. Right? Okay, so market basket, a sample. In real life, all right, they'd have different kinds of food, drink, other kinds of supplies that the average American would buy. For this class, you have to be able to calculate based on whatever you're given, right? So you would get a question like, let's say in the market basket we have pens, shirts, and shoes. And and the average person buys 10 pens, 5 shirts, 3 pairs of shoes. How do you calculate the CPI? Well, first, you can't just count the item numbers. You have to know, this is the most important part, what are the prices that are being charged for each of these, right? So, the next column that you see in your book is current year prices, correct? And what is the current year price for pens? Tim?
70 cents.
Correct, 70 cents each. So you multiply these two across, and the average person in America, according to this example, is spending how much money on pens? 10 times 70, easy, $7. Right? What about shirts? What's the average price there, Nicole? $14 each on average. So 5 times 14 is, says it in your book, 70 bucks. Average person is spending 70 bucks in their market basket on shirts, right? 3 pairs of shoes at 30 bucks a pop. 90 bucks. All right. So, whatever numbers they give you, you multiply them out, and then you add them all up. So the average person is spending how much current year on their market basket, Kayla?
167.
Yep, 167. So that's current year. Now how do you calculate the CPI? The formula in your book says take the total dollar expenditure on the market basket this year and divide it by the base year. Correct. So now we have to calculate that, and that's the second half of the chart. All right? And as your chart shows, in a previous year, you have all these things, 10 pens, 5 shirts, 3 pairs of shoes, but the prices used to be lower. All right? So Ben, how much did pens used to cost? 20 cents each. So if I did 10 times 20 in the base year, an old year, how much did the average person spend on pens, Ben? $2. $2. All right, Paul, what was the price that shirts used to be? $7. $7. So 5 times 7 gives us 35. And then, Matt, what about shoes?
$10.
Times 10. Great. 3 times 10 is 30 bucks. So add all this together, and I get 67. So that's what I put down here. And now I have almost everything I need to calculate the CPI. 167 divided by 67 times 100. And your book shows what that comes to, right? It comes to 249. So if we go back online, right? Let's say we go back here and we go to CPI, current and historical charts. And you see those numbers, perhaps, or perhaps not.
Different window?
Oops, thanks. See those numbers there? 216, 185, 183, 184. That's how they come up with those numbers, okay? Now the market basket is not just some shoes, some pens, and some shirts. It's a much bigger list of stuff. But that's the method that you use to calculate that. Yeah?
How do they determine the quantity of each item?
It's a tricky proposition. You know, they look at sales out there that are reported by most of the companies whose records are public, and they try to estimate what the average purchase is by the average consumer. But there are plenty of criticisms to this. Plenty of criticisms. Just like with the unemployment rate, just like with GDP, there's certain things that aren't shown. Okay? So it's an imperfect science. That's one thing you want to keep in mind. Okay? It's a rough guide as to what's happening with prices, but there are weaknesses in how these things are calculated. Victor? How do they choose what? Oh, that's a good question. They just set it as a point in time, and then they start counting from there. So in your book, as a matter of fact, if you go to this chart, it should be opposite of the page we just used for calculations. Right around 1983, they would set as a base year, and that's also 100. Okay. Now, there's different ways of doing this, doing kinds of inflation calculations. One is, hey, you have to calculate the base year and the current year, or we'll just give you the base year. Or, you know what, you don't have to do any calculating of the CPI, but you have to compare CPIs, okay, as a way of judging whether prices are rising, falling, or staying the same, okay?
So they just pick any random year.
What's that?
They just pick any random
Yeah.
year.
That's exactly what they do.
What is, how accurate is CPI?
It's accurate in terms of what it measures, but the argument comes in, you know, is that the way that we should be measuring it? Just like with the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate leaves some pretty significant people out, like the homeless, or people that have become so discouraged looking for work, they've just given up. I kind of like to know what the number of those people are, but that's a very difficult thing to measure, right? All right, well, let's get on to another use of the CPI. Another thing that you're going to get asked is, say how much prices have risen. So when they say, okay, in the U.S., they rank, where do we rank? In the CIA World Factbook? 34th or something, right? Because according to that information, our prices went up how much? How much are prices going up according to, as of Friday, that you had to write down today? 1.39. So how do you get that? Well, you compare CPI from one year to the next year, or this year to the previous year. Well, how do you calculate the percentage increase in anything? Because your book has this formula, but this is like basic math. My son's in 4th grade. Pretty soon he's going to be able to do this, okay? How do you calculate the percentage increase in anything? Right? I mean, seriously, it could be anything. Like, let's say Bobby's hair length. When I taught him in business econ, his hair wasn't that long. And maybe, perhaps, way back then, we could have measured how long his hair was. Now we can measure it today, and then we do a percentage increase. What's the formula that we use for that? Or Gudis, in terms of the number of points he scored. Do you know how many points he scored last fall? Number of field goals? How many field goals did you take? 12 field goals? What about junior year? 9. All right? So here's another example. What was the percentage increase in field goals made for Matt? How do you calculate that? Your book uses slightly different terminology, right? But you always do the new number minus the old number over the old or the original number times 100. So what about Matt? 12 minus 9 over 9 times 100. So that becomes 3 over 9 times 100. 3 divided by 9 is 33%. He had a 33% increase in field goals made. You can give him a hand, that's fine. Go ahead and embarrass him. 33% increase. All right? Somebody play baseball? No baseball. Soccer? Do we have some numbers we can use for soccer on this? What do you got, Jamie?
Goals.
Number of goals scored?
This year?
0 to 1. Is that what it was? What's this year so far?
9.
9. Last year?
1.
1. So what was the percentage increase? All right, 9 minus 1 over 1 times 100 is 8 over 1 times 100. So what was the percentage increase for Jamie? 800%. He had an 800% increase, which sounds really dramatic, right? All right, Nicole, what about you? What about you?
I don't have anything.
You don't have any numbers? Who's got some numbers for me? Looking for a female in the house, maybe. What?
Making beer fancy crush on his head last night.
No? No other numbers? All right, did you get the idea?
The other day was 7.
It's okay, Bobby. I'm good. Thanks. I appreciate that. Now, same thing in your book, percentage change in prices. So what do? You do the CPI, all right, of the current year, this year, minus the CPI of the old or the base year,